about philosophical issues about virtual reality. I know some of you have had a chance to play around with virtual reality here upstairs. I'm interested in it because I think it raises incredible philosophical issues. What is a virtual reality? It's a kind of artificial world, a computer-generated world. For a philosopher who's interested in the mind, the world, and the relationship between them, thinking about artificial minds and artificial worlds, I think it helps you to understand the mind and the world themselves in much better detail as kind of a pure test case. So virtual reality, as many of you know, is a technology that's been making a really big breakthrough the last couple of years. You know, the Oculus Rift has been released to consumers, the HTC Vive, a lot of you have played around with the Samsung Gear and the Google Cardboard. The definition of virtual reality, a virtual reality environment is an environment which is immersive, interactive, and computer generated. Immersive means it gives you like a 3D environment, a sense of being there in the middle of the environment. You put on one of these headsets and you are there. You are there in the world. Furthermore, it's interactive. You can make a difference to the world. I can play tennis. I played tennis last year in virtual reality against virtual Maria Sharapova. And after a little while, I was even hitting the ball back across the net. I think she was impressed. It's interactive. But the most important thing is it's computer generated, a fully computer generated environment where the inputs you're getting all come from a computer. I mean, many of you will have played with video games, desktop virtual worlds, and so on, which have two of these features. They're interactive and they're computer generated, but not fully immersive. Many of the same issues apply to these, but the real case is the immersive, interactive, computer generated case, which in the limit is potentially indistinguishable from our ordinary non-virtual reality, or so we think, non-virtual reality. So virtual realities raise any number of philosophical issues. I mean, one of them I just alluded to. One of them is, how do we know that we are not in a virtual reality right now? How do you know you're not in a computer simulation right now? You know, for a lot of us, those probabilities have risen quite a bit in the last few weeks and months. Are those simulators messing with us? Are they turning up the dial to see, what we can take and what we can handle? Are we doing some weird political experiments? I mean, there's some reasons to think that, many simulations are going to be developed in the history of the universe. There'll be many more simulated universes than non-simulated universes. You think, what are the odds we're one of the lucky ones at level 0? Maybe far more likely we're in a simulation. Another issue which gets raised is whether virtual reality is a kind of a real reality. There's a long tradition of saying that virtual reality is a kind of second-class reality. William Gibson, back in Neuromancer in the 1980s, said cyberspace, meaning virtual reality, is a kind of consensual hallucination. It's not real. It's a kind of a fiction. I want to argue against that kind of view. I don't think virtual reality is a second-class reality. I think in principle, virtual reality can be as real as an ordinary physical reality. And if it does turn out, for example, that we right now are in a virtual reality, that does not mean this world is an illusion. Rather, it means we're living in a world that is fundamentally digital. There are still people around me. There are still tables and chairs and books in this library. It's all real. If it's virtual, that's an interesting fact about the metaphysics of this world, about the underlying nature of our reality. It will turn out that our reality is digital. It's what some physicists have called an it from bit reality, where the it's all around us, this phone, my body, this table, you and you and you, are all fundamentally made of bits. If we're in a virtual reality, that is the nature of our world. But it's all perfectly real. So I think a virtual reality is a real digital reality. But the thing I really want to focus on today is the question, can you live a meaningful life in a virtual reality? Can you live a life with value and purpose in a virtual reality? Some people are inclined to think that in a virtual reality, in a computer simulation, life would be fundamentally meaningless and valueless. It's all an illusion, none of it's real, it would all somehow be empty. Inspiration for this view has been given to a lot of people by the philosopher Robert Nozick, who back in 1974 wrote a very influential book called Anarchy, State, and Utopia, which was a classic, among other things, for the political philosophy of libertarianism. But along the way, he had a wonderful thought experiment, the thought experiment of the experience machine, which many people have taken to be a kind of a strike against virtual reality. So Nozick describes this kind of VR device he calls an experience machine, and then asks, would you step in this machine? Here's what he says. Suppose there was an experience machine that would give you any experience you desired. Super duper neuropsychologists could stimulate your brain so you would think and feel you're writing a great novel, or making a friend, or reading an interesting book. All the time you'd be floating in a tank with electrodes attached to your brain. Should you plug into this machine for life, pre-programming your life experiences? That's Nozick, an experience, state, and utopia. Okay, who says yes, they would? Who says no, they wouldn't? Okay, majority for no, and I'm actually with you, that no is the to the experience machine as desired. I think the number one reason to say no to the experience machine is the idea that it's pre-programmed. That machine has mapped out your life's destiny for you. You know, it says that you're going to win the tennis match. It says you're going to write that great novel. It says you're going to write that book. It's all pre-programmed. Your destiny is there for you. In effect, you don't get to exert any free will. You don't overcome any challenges, overcome any obstacles. You don't get to make your own destiny. I just want to note, real virtual reality is not like that. In real virtual reality, we hook up to it. We still have a conscious thinker, a conscious subject at the center making their own decisions. Actual virtual realities are interactive. Even when you play a video game, you have to make the effort to win the game. You get to decide what to do. Go over here or go over there. If you go into Second Life, you can live your life this way or live your life that way. You still have free will. Even with a perfectly ordinary video game, you have a modicum of free will. In a rich virtual reality, it's highly interactive. You get to make your own decisions. You get free will. You get to make your own destiny. So I note the number one objection to the experience machine is being pre-programmed does not really apply to virtual reality. Nozick's second objection is that virtual reality is a kind of illusion. He says, we want to actually do things, perform actions, and not merely have the illusion of doing them. And I agree that we do. So for example, we want to actually move our bodies and interact with other people and not merely have the illusion of doing that. But I think it's quite important that really when we think about virtual reality, there's not much reason to think it's an illusion. When I'm in virtual reality, I might have an avatar, I might interact with other people's avatars. They're virtual bodies, if you like. This is my virtual body, which I do things virtually with. That's their virtual body. We might have virtual interactions. And I think that is a real fact. It's a real, genuine fact about my life that I have this virtual body, they have this virtual body, and we are virtually interacting in virtual reality. There is nothing illusory about that. It's a real fact, and it's ultimately constituted partly by some digital facts on a computer, as well as by my conscious mind and their conscious mind. But I am genuinely interacting with another conscious person. We genuinely have these digital bodies which are digitally interacting. I think there's no reason to think that's an illusion. And I think, in fact, anyone who spends a lot of time in virtual reality, you develop, what I call a phenomenology of virtuality and experiencing things as virtual, where, I experience, this applies especially with so-called augmented or mixed realities, where you experience physical objects and virtual objects. You get a sense, these are the virtual ones, these are the physical ones. You have the phenomenology of virtuality. There doesn't need to be any kind of illusion there. So, yes, I do act with my virtual body. I experience myself acting with a virtual body. I do act with a virtual body. There's nothing illusory about it. It's a different body. It's not the same as my non-virtual body, but it's a body all the same. Nozick also objects that the experience machine is artificial. He says it's human-made. We value natural reality. So fair enough. I think it's okay to have naturalness as a value, and to value, for example, living in an untouched forest as opposed to living in an artificial environment. And notice that on this score, virtual realities are no worse than, for example, New York City or any city. A number of people here have chosen to live their life in New York City, and I take it you found some modicum of meaning and value here. So I hope, it's certainly possible to find value in a virtual environment. It's, one can value nature, and I respect that, but it's merely an optional value. So I don't see any count here against virtual reality, which doesn't apply, for example, to cities. So I don't think myself that the experience machine argument gives reason to reject virtual reality as a source of meaningful life. I mean, it's true there are some obstacles to living that make life in virtual reality somewhat unlike non-virtual reality. Currently, at least as it stands, virtual reality lacks many sources of value that are present in ordinary non-virtual reality. I mean, many of them are just temporary due to limitations on the current technology. For example, embodiment. The bodies one has in virtual reality are far less rich and interesting than those we have in non-virtual reality. Hunger and thirst and pain don't really have analogs in VR, let alone anything as interesting as sex. But still, those things are coming. People are working on them. And, I hear that teledildonics in virtual reality is already having billions poured into it. Probably within a century, those things are going to be at the level of things like where vision and audition are today. I mean, there are some issues in VR which may run deeper. If you value nature, you're not going to get it exactly from VR. If you value a very long history, you may not get it from VR. Still, kind of think that the kind of value you get from living life in VR could, in principle, be analogous to that we might get in a non-virtual reality. In the future, this is practically relevant. Because in the future, we are all going to be faced with this decision, whether or not to spend more and more of our lives in virtual reality. Many people already spend enormous amounts of time in World of Warcraft or Minecraft or other virtual environments. As VR environments get richer and richer, they may in some ways get much better than the real world. Boy, if the real world keeps going in certain directions, it may become a very unattractive place, and VR may become very attractive. An analogy here would be, think about, we might have the option, say at some point, to go to Mars, just as at various points Europeans went to settle in Australia or the US. And then, so something like Mars might be a new environment to live in. It would lack certain sources of value that you had in the old environment. It may not have the rich social history. You'd be leaving some of your loved ones behind and so on. Still, it seems you could, if you went to join a new society on Mars, you could probably have a life there, creating sources of value of your own, creating your own meaning in a new tradition. I think that's roughly the status of virtual worlds as I see them. Virtual worlds can be used for, there are going to be better virtual worlds, and there are going to be worse. There are going to be more meaningful ones and more meaningless ones, depending on your sources of meaning. But we, as conscious beings, are creators of our own meaning and purpose in our lives. And as far as I can see, those things can be exemplified, in a virtual world, in a virtual reality, just as well as in a non-virtual reality. So just worth asking, what is the philosophical view that lies behind all this, that renders a virtual reality real versus not? The kind of, some of you know Berkeley's philosophy of idealism. Reality is all in the mind. It's just reality is just a big set of experiences. You might think that's the philosophy we need here, Well, in VR we have all the same experiences, therefore it would be real. Now I, like most philosophers, reject idealism. I think reality requires more than what's in the mind. I think it involves a bunch of stuff going on out there in the external world, interacting behind my experiences and generating them. And if, for example, there'd be ways the world could be outside my experiences, that would be, to my mind, very undesirable, whether or not I know they're happening. But a different philosophy, which I think has become a very popular philosophy in recent philosophy of science and metaphysics, is the philosophy of structuralism. What matters to the physical world is the pattern of interaction of physical objects. Entities in the external world interact with certain patterns. We might feel that we've got a grasp on certain intrinsic properties of the external physical world, the blueness of the blue over there. But in fact, blueness is just something which affects our experience in a certain way. We might feel we've got an intrinsic grasp on solidity, but no, objects are mostly empty space. What it is for objects to be solid is a matter of how they interact with each other. We might feel we've got a grasp on space, but no, space itself in recent physical theories is really understood in terms of underlying patterns of interaction. Things are close and they can affect each other in certain ways. So the moral, increasingly, is that physical reality is just a set of patterns of interaction. Quantum mechanics. The world of quantum mechanics looks extremely insubstantial. It's just these wave functions, but somehow, via patterns of interactions, it adds up to the world we experience. The same goes for virtual reality. Now, I want to add, I'm not saying that all the world is only patterns of interaction. Consciousness is important too, and I've spent a lot of my life thinking about consciousness. Consciousness is, in many respects, the source of meaning and where the meaning in our lives comes from. And somehow, consciousness invests our external physical world with meaning in virtue of the patterns of interaction in the physical world and the way our consciousness values it. In a virtual reality, you can have the same kinds of patterns of interaction, I think, at least in principle, as in a physical world. So although initially it might seem to us that a virtual reality is somehow insubstantial or fake, I think ultimately it has the same kind of genuine reality as a physical world, at least when inhabited by a conscious subject at its center. And I think this is important because in the future, we're going to have the capacity to create virtual worlds far beyond the limitations of this physical world, with patterns of interactions and modes of inhabiting them that go far beyond anything we've imagined, possibly with the ability to lead lives with greater kinds and levels of meaning and value than anything we've experienced to date. I think it's a long project in the decades and centuries to come, but I'd at least say there's no philosophical obstacle to living a meaningful life in virtual reality. I think virtual reality is not a second-class reality. Thank you very much. Yeah. You and the other.